That's Gishma. That's Gishma. That's a Daf Yomi story. Good evening. We're learning Maseches Taanis Daf Yotes, starting at a new parak at the bottom of Yud Ches Amud Beis, the famed story tonight of Choni Hamagel. Baruch Hashem. It's going to be in this Mishnah. As you can see, the Mishnah starts on the bottom of Yud Ches Amud Beis and B'chaste Hashem kilo samnu kilo chalu rachamav. It goes down about 3/4 of the page. I'm just a happy camper. David and I have spoken about this. Anyone who teaches anything about Mishnayos loves long Mishnayos, so it's great.
This is the second one.
Yeah. I don't think it's as big as the last Mishnah we had. Last Mishnah we had was huge. All right, new Mishnah. Let's go. New Mishnah, new parak. We're learning parak Seder Taanis Elu, and that's what the Mishnah starts with. Seder Taanios Elu. All the fasts that we've spoken about, 3 + 3 + 7, in the times of a drought. Berevia Amur, Berevia Rishona, the ones that we're speaking of, we're only talking about in regards to the lack of the first rain. The Revia Rishona is the first rain. Aval Tzmachim Sheshanu. If it did rain and there were some growths of vegetation, but Sheshanu, they didn't grow nicely, then Masriin Alein Miyad. We don't wait at all. We instantly, because remember we saw in the previous parak that there are certain dates, 7th of Cheshvan, 3rd of Cheshvan, all the different dates, Rosh Chodesh, none of that. We are Masriin Alein Miyad, we blow shofar or say Anenu right away. V'chein as well, Shepasku Gshamin ben Geshem leGeshem Arbaim Yom. If there's 40 days between one rain and the next, also Masriin Alein. The second you get to day 40, we instantly are going to be masriya mipnei shehi makas b'tzoras. We'll see what this means soon. A makas b'tzoras means that we're concerned about a food shortage. A tzara and a makas b'tzoras. Well, the Gemara will speak about this. Yardu litzmachin. If the rain does come down and it grows aval lo yardu le'ilan, the rain comes down and it helps vegetation to grow, but it doesn't help trees to grow. Or le'ilan v'lo litzmachim, the rain, the type of rain is good for trees, but not for vegetation. Lazev v'lazed, rain for both trees and vegetation, but not for the cisterns that collect drinking water. So then in all of those cases, masriin alehen miyad, because drinking water is going to be a huge problem. Everybody always has to have drinking water. So that's a problem. So in Flint, Michigan, they remember over at a time, they had to filter their water. They had with all the lead, they had to boil their water, they had to buy bottled water, they had brought in water trucks. I mean, it was a big problem. People lost their jobs, people lost their lives. It was very bad. So that's what the Gemara says, is when there's no drinking water, masriya and alein miyad, the second it runs out, you instantly are masriya, you start blowing shofar and fasting, whatever it is. And similarly, Ir shelo yardu aleh gshamim, a city that did not get rain, in contrast to its neighboring city, which did. D'chsiv, as the pasuk writes, v'imtarti al ir achas, on one city that got rain, ba'al ir achas lo amtir, and another city did not get rain. Chelka achas tamtir, only one part of it got rain. Says the Gemara at the top of the Mishnah, at the top of your Testament, osa ha'ir mis'ana u'misras, the city that has no rain, so they're going to be mis'ana, they're going to fast, and they're going to be misras, they'll be masri. And the cities that surround it, the immediate surrounding cities, they are also part of this, because any tzara that inner city is having, the outer city is going to have as well. All of the supply in the market is all comparable. But it's not as severe as the city itself. So the surrounding cities are not masriya. Rabbi Kiva reversed it for the surrounding cities. Omer masriyos v'lo misanos, that they do truas, but they don't do the fasting. And similarly, if it's a city that has some type of destruction, or if the buildings are falling down, that might have been the din in L'chora and Surfside. There might have been such a halacha that if a building should have fallen, so then again, if this Mishnah is la halacha, and it is in fact quoted in Tur Shulchan Aruch, so maybe it is the din, then misanu misras, then one should have to fast and one should have to blow shofar. And the surrounding cities, in the case of Dever or Mapolis, would be misanos v'lo masrios. They'd fast, but they wouldn't have the truos. Rabbi Kiva argues here again, as he did in the previous section of the Mishnah, Omer masrios v'lo misanos. It's the reverse, where we do the truos, but we don't do the fasting. Ezu dever. What is the definition of dever? The type of destruction that hits a city that we just spoke about. So ir hamotzia chamesh meos ragli. There are 500 people there. It's really not people. This is referring to able-bodied men, so separate of wives and children and people who are older. If there are 3 people who die over the course of 3 days, so hareza dever. That's the parameters of dever. The second that happens, Rachmana litzlan, then a city's obligated. The city's then obligated to fast. Yeah, I mean, almost a prototype. Yeah, well, it's not. It doesn't say that. It says dever, which is a little. it's a little harder to translate, but yeah, but that's how we define it. It doesn't matter what we define it as in English. You can call it a plague, you can call it whatever you want. The halachic definition is 3 deaths in a row. So l'chora, there should have been a day of fasting in Asra. Yeah, and even if you look at it from a narrow city scope, we had that. Chicago, big as it is, you want to go by zip code. How did the poskim look at that? It's a good question. I don't know how they would look at it. Even within zip code, if you have a bigger zip code like we do, 60645 or 76 or 77, whatever it is, zip. Yeah. No, at the peak, I had friends in my orbit who told me that every day they were getting multiple death notices in like major metropolitan New York cities. Yeah, so l'chora, if that's true, Hirschway, I didn't even think about the application, though I should have. It would seemingly trigger this halacha. Pachos mikan, if the deaths are smaller in number than that or in frequency, ein zed dever. Al elu masrin b'chol makom, and the following were masriya no matter what. Al hashidafon, this is something that destroys crops, as Rashi says. Vala yurakon, we've learned about this disease. It's something in the urinary tract of some kind. It's an illness. Ve'al ha'arbe ve'al ha'chasil, these are different types of locusts that destroy things. Ve'al ha'chaya ra, ve'al ha'cherev, on wild animals, I should say on evil animals, on bad animals, and on cherev, on swords. Masriyan aleha mipnei shehi maka mahaleches, because it's continuous and we need to interrupt whatever process is going on. Maisa, there was a story 12 lines down in the Mishnah Yud Testament Aleph. Maisa shiyar duzikanim Yerushalayim la'arehem v'gazur tainis al shenira kimelo pitanur shidafon be'Ashkelon. They saw only what looked like a pitaner's worth of shidafon. They saw this certain type of plague, this certain type of negative effect impacting the crops, and they instantly went into their mode of gzera. That's what it was a very small amount. An awful story where where a wolf killed 2 children, consumed 2 children. And Rabbi Yossi Omer, it doesn't even have to be that far. Omer lo al she'achlu ela al sheniru. I got a picture yesterday from someone that they thought that maybe they saw a wolf here in Chicago, in a suburb in Chicago. Today I got it. That's why they sent it, I'm sure, because it was Daf Yomi related. But maybe we should say that l'chora, that's the case. So that's how the Gemara concludes this section of the Mishnah. We're about a third of the way down, 8 lines before the wide lines. Al elu masrin b'Shabbos. We saw this Gemara out of context a little bit earlier. That the following are scenarios where we are Masriya b'Shabbos, al irshi kifu nachrim, where you're surrounded by unfriendly neighbors, o nahar, or if there's a flood, al hasfina hamitarefes b'yam, if you see a ship that is starting to sink in the water. Rabbi Yossi Omer, lazar v'lo letze'aka, that you're allowed to ask for help, but you should not be doing tzedakah. We saw earlier in Rashi, earlier in the Masechta, when this Gemara was brought up, that Shabbos is not a time to ask for bakashos. Obviously, this is a scenario that isn't pikuach nefashos, because forget you storming the heavens, you do whatever you need to do when there's pikuach nefashos. Obviously, tefillah should be a part of that. Shimon HaTemani Omer afala dever v'lo hodu lo chachamim, that Shimon HaTemani wanted to say that you should even be masriya on Shabbos for dever. The chachamim didn't agree. And then the Mishnah continues, Al kol tzara shelo tavo ala tzibur, for all of the terrible things that might happen to the tzibur, masriyan alei, and here's what they are. We are masriyan all of them, chutz me'rov geshamim, except for when there is a lot of water by rain, that we don't complain. You don't want to complain about too much of a good thing. And here comes the famous story, halfway down, 3 lines before the wide lines. There was a story where they told Choni HaMa'agel, he's padal shiur du geshamim. You know how to daven, as the Mishnah will soon say. He was a ben bias by Kadosh Baruch Hu. Please help us to get some rain. Last short line. Amar lehem se'u v'yichnisu tanurei pesachim b'shvil shelo yemuku. Go get your ovens that you use for Pesach. So they had a Pesach oven, and they kept it away from the regular oven, so no one would use it. But they kept it outside. But now you got to bring it inside. We don't want it to get ruined. And basically, he was showing a confidence that he knew that he was going to be able to make it rain. So it says the Gemara, he's palel v'lo yardu geshamim. He davened and expected, as we should sometimes, that Hashem will answer our tefillos, but he didn't get the rain that he wanted. So what did he do? Og uga, he drew a circle, v'amad besocha, and stood in the middle. V'amar lefanov, and he said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ribono shalom, banecha samu pneim alai. Your children, they put their faith in me. Sha'ani keben bayis lefanecha, because they know that I'm a regular by you. Nishba ani b'shimcha hagadol. I make a shvua, said Choni HaMa'agel, that in your name, Hashem, with your great name, she'eni zaz mikan, I am not leaving here, ad sheterachem al banecha, until you show rachamim on your children and make it rain. So says the Mishnah, hischilu geshamim min atfen. Then all of a sudden it started to drizzle. Amar, here's the brazenness of Choni Amagel. Lo kach sha'alti. That's not what I asked for. It's just unbelievable. Like sometimes at work, you have to ask your boss for something. They say yes. You're like, well, what I meant was. So he says, "Mamish ba'azus panim, azus de kedusha." Amar lo kach sha'alti ela gishmei boros shichin umaros. I need enough to fill up the cisterns for drinking water. So he's chilu leireid bizav. Then HaKadosh Baruch Hu, just a total downpour. Then he pushes back again. Amar lo kach sha'alti. Come on, that's not what I asked for either. You know what I'm looking for? Ela gishmei ratzon bracha unadava. Give me what's reasonable, a normal gesund rain, but nothing that's crazy, just regular rain. I'm not asking for anything special. Yardu kitikna nachiyatu Yisrael miyushalayim laharabais mibdei akshamim. So it started really a regular rain, but it was a regular rain for a long time. And the water started to pile up a little bit and it was kind of raising a little bit. And what do you do when there's a lot of rain? You seek higher ground. They came over to Choni Amagel and they said, just like you pushed back on HaKadosh Baruch Hu to give you the right kind of rain, to give you rain and then the right kind of rain, you should also make a bracha that you should daven into HaKadosh Baruch Hu that they should go away. Amar lehem, I will not do that. So this literally translates, go out and see what the Even HaToin is. The Even HaToin is a place where someone would stand when they wanted to make an announcement. But the Mefarshim say, he was pushing them away and saying, I will not ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu this question. But that bothered, as we'll soon see, that bothered Shimon ben Shetach. Why did it bother Shimon ben Shetach? Because what did we see? What did we see that Choni Amagel did when he didn't like the rain? He pushed back. So why isn't he pushing back here? So it says the Gemara, the Mishnah, 4 lines before the Mishnah. It's actually not a Mishnah because that Masnisin shouldn't be there. But anyways, before that bolded word, Shalach lo Shimon ben Shetach il malech chone ata. If not for the fact that you are chone hama'agel, gozrani alecha nidu, I would make you into an excommunicated person because you had no problem pushing against the drizzle. You had no problem pushing against the torrential rains. And here all of a sudden you're not helping us. What's the problem? You get to do something wrong before Hashem and Hashem embraces you. No problem at all. Parents love their children so much. You're a regular, you're an insider. Very good. That your parents, your mother and father will be happy with you with your youthful happiness. Okay. I'm just saying, it's just it's a pasuk, It's not a pasuk in Tanakh, it's a pasuk in Kriyas Hashem. You gotta just it's like what sefer of Tanakh is it? It's in Kriyas Hashem. I don't even know where it is. Where is it? All right, you know Mishlei by heart. I know. It's yeah, so that's the youthful child. Even when they kick and they scream and they color on the walls, but okay. But at the end of the day, it's my little kid. So we try to hide the permanent markers, let him color in crayon, and then we'll paint every 5 years, and all will be well. The Mishnah continues. It says Masnisin, but the Mishnah continues. Let's say that a person started a fast, and then right when they started the fast, it started to rain. So it depends. If the rain started before Netzachama, so then don't finish your fast. But if the rain stops after Netzachama, so then you still need to finish your fast. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, he says that there is a distinction to be made, but the distinction isn't Netzachama. The distinction is later in the day, which is a bigger kula, which is to say that it is chatzos. Ma'isa, there was a story. Shegazur Taanis belud. They made a gzeir in lud. V'yardu lehem gshamim kodem chatzos. So let's see how we paskin now, because we saw 2 possibilities: either that the line in the sand is going to be Netzachama, or the line in the sand is going to be chatzos hayom. So it says the Gemara, Amar lehem Rabbi Tarfon. What did he say? Go out and eat, v'shasu, and drink, v'asu yom tov, make today a yom tov, v'yatsu v'achlu v'shasu v'asa yom tov, u'bo bein ha'arbayim v'karo halal hagadol. And then as shevach for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they got together by bein ha'arbayim, by the evening, by mincha time, and they said halal hagadol. So halal hagadol in the context of Shas and Mishnayos is typically a reference to what we say on Shabbos, the hodul Hashem kito ki le'olam chasa, hodul adonehu adonim ki le'olam chasa, that parak of Tehillim that kind of looks part A, part B. And at a lot of the secular brises I do, you'll see the secular rabbi will say Hodul Hashem ki tov, and the rest of the room will say Ki le'olam chasa. That's not correct. Pasha, that's not true, because Kol pasuk de lo paskin Moshe anan lo paskinan. That's not the pasuk. The pasuk is not half a pasuk. I've always wondered this. Why don't we, when the Chazan says Yihalalu Hashem Hashem kiniskav shmo levado, we should be saying that as well. We shouldn't be responding Hodol eretz v'shamayim. That's the second half of the pasuk. So I never asked a shayla. I don't know. I just always say both because I don't know, because it's only part of the pasuk. So similarly, we should be saying, and this is not the context here, but that's what's going on here, is that they would read Halal Hagadol. That brings us to the end of this lengthy Mishnah, almost an Amurin, Yud Testament Aleph, 8-9 lines from the bottom. What? Oh, that's Mishnah.
All right.
Yep, you got it. It's pretty long. So let's dig in. Let's go back to where we started. We had said in the beginning of our Mishnah on the bottom of Yud Ches Amud Beis, Seder Taanis Elu Ha'omer B'Revia Rishona. We had said that all we were talking about, the three fasts, and the 7 fasts, we're only talking about the Revia Rishona, the first rain that we were looking forward to having. But Reminhi, that doesn't work with all of the Tanaim, because we have a source in the Tanaim that conflicts head to head with our Mishnah. Revia Rishona V'Shniya Lishol Shlishi Slihizanos. It's only when there's the third rain, not the first and the second. So that's a steer with our Mishnah. Amar Yehuda Hachi Kamar. This is how we can fix up these two Mishnayos. Ours is a Mishnah. This is seemingly a Tosefta or a Brisa, probably a Brisa. So how do we understand it? Hachi Kamar, says the Gemara, 7-8 lines from the bottom. Seder Tainiosa Amor Emosai. When do we talk about the 3, 3, and 7? That's Bizman Shiyatza Revia Rishona V'Shniya V'Shlishis V'Lo Yardu Geshamim. That's when the first 3 Revios are gone, and then we have to discuss what are our fast days. There's been no rain yet. Aval Yardu Geshamim B'Revia Rishona. If in fact there was rain in the Revia Rishona, in that first rain that we had hoped for, V'Zara V'Lo Tzamchu, there was planting, but there was no growth. Inami Tzamchu V'Chazru V'Nishtanu, or that there was growth, but then it changed, it grew incorrectly. Masriyan Alein Miyah. That's our Mishnah. That's Masriyan. The language in our Mishnah is difficult because it says Seder Tainios Eluham or Rishona. So obviously there has to be some changing of the language in our Mishnah for the answer that Rav Yehuda gives over here to be correct. Amar Rav Nachman Dafka Nishtanu. That's only true if it changes shape. That's when we're Masri and Aval Yavshu Lo had it been completely dried out. That's not the case. There is some company that sells imperfectly shaped vegetables. They send them to your house. What's the name of the company? Perfectly. I can't remember what it is. They sell fruits and vegetables that are in like abnormal shapes that don't make it to the shelves in most of the stores, but it tastes exactly the same. So people who want to save a buck will buy a whole box of squash, and they don't look like squash. They look totally misshaped. So that's, I can't remember the name of it. We'll remember it in about 12 minutes. Call it out. No. Oh, not important. Let's continue. Anyways, the Gemara says that if it's completely dried out, there we're not masriin. Says the Gemara, that should be obvious. If it's completely dried out, of course you're not masriin. That's done for. It's dead. What are you going to do with a dead tree? That doesn't help. Says the Gemara, Pshita, Nishtanu, it's not. The Mishnah says Nishtanu. That only means that it grows in a different shape. It doesn't look so nice, but at least it still grew. But here we're talking about dead grass. Of course, we're not going to be masriya. Says the Gemara, Lotzricha de Akun. We're talking about a case where it did grow slightly, and then it started to brown or to whiten or whatever the color of death is. Ma'udetema akanta milsi, that this minor growth is considered something reasonable. Kamash malan, that it is not. That's why the Gemara specifically had to say, that's why Rav Nachman specifically said, Dafka nishtanu aval yavshu. This brings us to the 2 dots toward the bottom of the page, 2 lines from the bottom of your testament. Let's continue. We said if there's 40 days between 2 rains, we should also be masriya. My makas betzoras. What was the Mishnah referring to when it says that there's a food shortage? It's something that will lead to. It's not a makkah right now. Right now, you might have food on the shelves, but we're looking at the supply chain, and what we're seeing is that the supply chain is going to be compromised, because over here we see Amarav makkah hamivili de batzoras. It's going to lead to a food shortage. Amarav Nachman, and this, how do we define this? Nahara. If the only way to get food is by using the waterways, so you're going to put food on a boat, which for now that's normal for us. We ship food through water all the time. We don't realize it, but a lot of our food is shipped by boat. Hopefully, most of our vegetation is shipped in a refrigerated boat, or it's shipped by plane, so it's a little bit faster. Depends on what you're selling. Some things have a great shelf life. You want to talk about sweet potatoes and you want to talk about regular potatoes, they can handle a couple of days on a boat, no big deal. So says the Gemara on the bottom of your testament, Aleph, Amar Rav Nachman Nahara, then that's called Bitzorta. That's considered to be a food shortage. However, Medinta Amedinta Kafna. If you're talking about from one Medina to another, not just a riverway between one part of Bavel and another, that's only Batzores. But if you're going from Medina to Medina, like we have in our culture, this would be different now, because it's like just normal for us to do that. We import and export food all the time. So then in the times of the Gemara, that was kafna. That was considered to be a total famine. What's the definition of kafna? Second line of Rashi, all the way on the right side. Dibra maschil kafna. Rav, the Rav Kashim Batzoras, Lefi Shei Efshar Lahavi Shavi Bishuv, you can't bring Moreinu Rabbi. He said, you can't bring any food. There's nothing left. It's just empty. So this is worse than the Batzoras. It's Mimi Medina Medina. Says the Gemara of Amar Reb Chanina, Sa Besela Ushchicha. If the food is present, but Sa Besela, but the market is very high, that's considered Batsorta because it's hard to pay for things. If it's Arba, if it's a regular market, this was considered what their regular market was, how many units to the dollar. So if you have money, but there's no food to buy, that's kafna. That's even worse. It's a regular market. So let's say today, right now, the shelves are empty of toilet paper or food or whatever the necessary staple is. So that would be considered kafna. That's a worse level. Amar Rav Yochanan, all of this only makes sense when it's mos bezol, when it's easy to make money and fruits are expensive. Aval mos beyoker, if it's hard to make money, you pay rispazol, but it's easy to buy fruit, then so what? Masrina lemiyah, then that doesn't help because no one can afford anything. The Amar Rabbi Yochanan, here now I saw with my own eyes that when I saw that the market was in a certain way, I saw that people were swollen with starvation, because no one was able to get money. So if the market is such that it's very difficult to get a job, so there's a lot of people, the unemployment rate, let's talk in our parlance, the unemployment rate is very, very high and no one's hiring. So even if there's food, so what? That's crisis mode. So then you should really be davening. That's when you should be masrin. That would be the modern day application of this Gemara. So we say 8 lines down in your Testament base, Yardu Litzmachan Avalo Ilan. We had said the various different cases, the various types of rain. So it says the Gemara, I could envision a type of rain that helps vegetation but not trees. What type of rain is that? Where I have rain that comes in very lightly, but it's not a lot of rain. That's Mamish Israel's invention of the very, very slow irrigation drip hoses that let out just the perfect amount of water without wasting any water. It's great way, and it's made it around the world. Very clever model. Fine. So I understand how you can grow vegetation, but that amount of rain is not going to be helpful to grow a tree. Trees need copious amounts of water, and this isn't it. Says the Gemara, last short line, and I could also understand a type of rain that's very good for trees and not for vegetation, where there is copious amounts of rain, but that's not good for vegetation because the rain could come down too hard. It's not good. It uproots the seeds. It's not good. I could also understand a type of rain where we have rain that is good both for an ilan and for tzmachin, for trees and for vegetation, but not for the cisterns that hold drinking water. What would the case be? To asya razia v'nicha, where sometimes the rain is intense and sometimes the rain is subtle. Mihu to velo asya, but it's never in very high volume. That would work out. I could understand all of these cases. But here's the one case, says the Gemara, 2 lines into the wide lines that I don't understand. That which we say, where you have rain that does fill the cisterns for drinking water, but it doesn't provide proper rain for trees and for vegetation. What type of rain is that? Says the Gemara, that's when you have like a flash flood. Huge amounts of water, which will fall to the cisterns. However, it's bad both for trees and for vegetation. That's how the Gemara answers. Now we're going to learn a whole bunch of brises till the end of the page. We're actually going to go pretty far down on Chaf Amud Aleph because the story doesn't end till there. It's fast, but it's pretty far down, and then we'll stop basically 2 lines into the middle with lines on Chaf Amud Aleph, and then we'll stop. That'll also help us for tomorrow night, because if you take a quick peek at Chaf Amud Beis, you'll see that it's a little bit of a big page, and tomorrow is Thursday, so Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph is also one of our pages. We'll be spending a lot of time together. Says the Gemara, 1/4 of the way down, Tanu Rabban, and the rabbis have taught us in the Brisa. Masriya al ha'ilanos, we do daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I should say, we're masriya when it comes to ilanos, to trees, bipros Pesach, that haven't yet bloomed by Pesach. And when it comes to alboros v'shichin u'ma'aros, to drinking water, afilu bipros Chag, even by Sukkot, we're going to be concerned about that, because as we mentioned, you can't be without drinking water. Under all circumstances, if there's no drinking water, masriya alein miyad, it's always time for being masriya. Yeah. What?
So if rain doesn't come the following Sukkot.
Previous Sukkot. Meaning we look at the year. Yeah, we're talking about.
No.
Yeah, we're talking about the previous Sukkot. I think that's no, that doesn't make sense, because it's crisis mode, right? So we're talking about not having anything to drink. I think so. Rashi says, "Aval b'pros hachag lahashkos zrayim b'esa behemtam." This isn't talking about drinking water. The next part is talking about drinking water. I think you're correct, actually. Okay, so that's what the Gemara says. Ve'al kulan. Okay, yeah. Ve'ezehu miyad shalahen. When we say miyad, does it mean like miyad? It's 2 p.m. on a Wednesday. All of a sudden we start fasting. So what does miyad mean? Says the Gemara. No, it means sheni b'chamishi b'sheni b'hab. It starts at whatever the first Monday is that follows. So if this is a Tuesday, you're going to wait 6 days for your miyad. The miyad here, it doesn't mean instantaneously. It means a halachic miyad, and the halachic definition of miyad in this case is bahab. Ve'alkulan in masrian ela be'aparchia shalahen. It has to make sense with what's going on in the land in which you are in, under the leadership which you are in, but you're in another city. That doesn't make sense. Your masrian should be here. Ve'askara, famously from the story of Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim. What about askara, that disease that can kill people? Bisman sheyesh b'misa masrin aleh. When we see that there are deaths that are taking place because of askara, then masrin. Bisman shein b'misa ein masrin aleh. It's not stam that just because there's a disease called askara that everyone should be masrin. It's only when it applies. There's a certain type of locust. When we find any of it, then we should be masrin. Rav Shimon ben Elazar Omer af ala chagav. Chagav is typically translated as a grasshopper. Is that what our scroll says? It's a grasshopper. Does anyone have that? Masrin ala chagav, af ala chagav. Okay, that's what it says here.
The note says Rav Shimon ben Elazar considers even the slight of a few chagav locusts.
So they're destructive grasshoppers. They're not stam grasshoppers. They're causing damage, right? Most grasshoppers are not so dangerous, I guess. They're kosher too. 1/3 of the way down, Tanu Rabbanan Masrian al Ha'ilanos Beshar Shnei Hashavua, that in a Shemitah cycle, one should be masriya on trees that have not been properly saturated on years 1 through 6, but not through 7, because the 7th year is a Shemitah year. Alaboros ve'lashichin ve'lama'aros, when it comes to these cisterns, afila b'shvis, even during a shvis year, that would be problematic. Rashba gomer afal ha'ilanos b'shvis, even for trees, we would still be masriya for them, even in a Shemitah cycle, because when fruits become hefker, the anim could benefit from it, and therefore it's not a halachic problem to daven that those should grow, so that when the food falls off of it and it becomes hefker, that the poor people can have what to eat. Another brisa and a similar brisa, 1/3 of the way down, a little bit more. Tanya idach masrin al ilanos b'shar shnei shavua, very similar. Years 1 through 6 of a Shemitah cycle, we can be masriya that ilanos should have water. That same exact thing. And Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer afal ilanos masrin ala safichen b'shvis mipnei sheish ben parnas elanim. Not only by trees, but even by sfichen. Sfichen is like the aftergrowth, like after you've cleaned the field, there's always some seeds left and they grow a little something. So that little something is good food for poor people and they should be able to benefit from it. So then when those things are lacking, we should be masriya. Halfway down. Tanya, the Brisa writes, Amar Rabbi Elazar ben Partam Yom Shachar Beis HaMikdash, from the day that the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed some 2,000 years ago, just about, Naseg Shamim Simukim La'olam. Simukim, it became less common. Simukim is a funny word. It usually means raisins. So it means a shrunken version, I guess, would be the right way to look at it in its context, but it means that there's less rain. Shana, there are some years Sheg Shameha Merubin, that there's plenty. Shana Sheg Shameha Mu'atan, some years there's less. Shana Sheg Shameha Yordan Bizmanon. Sometimes the rain comes in its right time. Shana Sheg Shameha Yordan Bizmanon. Let's go through all 4 of these and give a mashal for each one of them. Shana Sheg Shameha Yordan Bizmanon. What's an example of rains that come in the right time? Lamahu Domeh LeEved Shenosein Lo, an Eved who receives from his master Rabbo Parnasasu Be'echad B'Shabbos. He gets his food early in the week. He gets his pay early in the week. A bag of flour, a few bags of flour, whatever it is. Nimtes isa ne'efes ketikna v'ne'echeles ketikna. Then he has the opportunity to bake the bread properly and it'll cook properly. He's got plenty of time. He's got 6 days till Shabbos. He's got plenty of time to eat. What about a case of shana she'eng shemeh yordan bizman? And what is lamahu doma? What is a case where the gshamim, where the rains don't fall on time? Says the Gemara, that is similar to le'eved shenasan lo the rabba parnasasu be'erev Shabbos. It's the 11th hour. You're walking in 10 minutes before candlelighting and giving me a little food. I'm starving. So you quickly throw together a batch and you stick it in the oven. But says the Gemara, Nimtes isa nefes shelo ketikna v'necheles shelo ketikna. Wasn't baked right and wasn't eaten right. Didn't have enough time. Next case, 2/3 of the way down. Shana sheg shameh merubin lamahu domeh. What about a year when there's a lot of rain? How do we look at that? I'm giving you your whole paycheck for the whole year on the first paycheck of the fiscal cycle. So July 1, whatever it is, you're going to get your whole paycheck. That's what the Gemara says. that he gets everything b'vasachas. Nimtzu rechaim tochanos minakur masha tochnos minakav. This is a very interesting concept. If you take one container, let's say the container can hold 50 pounds of bread, and you get all 50 pounds of bread at the same time. So whatever sticks on the wall will be a very, very minuscule amount. It really won't minimize your food in a great way. But instead of getting 50 pounds, you only get 5 pounds. So then what is left on the insides of the rechaim, of the grinder of the flour, is significant. So that's what he's saying. When you get it all at once, it's a little bit better. But nimtzeis, and when you have that, nimtzeis, what we'll find is that isa ochelas minakur kamo ochelas minakav. The dough will, again, the dough on the sides is better for larger volumes than smaller. And what is the last case? When there isn't a lot of rain, you get a little bit at a time. And when you only get a little bit at a time, the nimtzu rechaim asha tochnos minakur tochnos minakav, you're still going to lose a percentage of your dough and your flour on the sides of the rechaim, and that's why it's better to have larger amounts and not smaller amounts. You only have a pound of flour, you lost 1/10 of the pound just in the grinding and things. You turn on the mixer too fast, some of the flour pops out of the bowl. That happens all the time. Fine. Nimtes isa. So that would not be good. You lost out on some of your food. Another possibility of what would be another case of a lot of rain. A person's making mortar. They take water and they put it with the appropriate solvent, solute. They're putting it with let's say cement. If there's a lot of water, then you'll be able to strike the balance. Mayim einon kalin, you'll have plenty of water left over. And then the mortar is going to be perfectly mixed. But if you only have a small amount of water, so then you might run out of water in the process of making the mortar. Mayim kalim that it doesn't do well. Last story of the day. It's fast. It's a great story. A story about the power of tefillah, and it will take us to the end of the day, halfway down approximately. And Chaf Meral, Tanu Rabbanim, we're 10 lines or so, 12 lines from the bottom of New Testament base. The rabbis teach us in a brisa. Everyone came up for Aliyah al-Regel. There wasn't enough water. Halach Nakdimon ben Gurion. We'll see soon that this wasn't his name. Nakdimon ben Gurion went over Eitzel Adon Echad. He went over to a noble person, a Roman noble person, and he said, Omar lo halveni shtemesrei ma'ayanos. Give me 12 of your cisterns, ma'im le'olei regalim, so that I can give water to the people who are traveling up to Yerushalayim. Ve'ani atein lecha shtemesrei ayanos ma'im, and I'll pay you back in kind, 12 for 12. And here's the upside for you, Mr. Roman general or Roman guy. If I fail to do so, then instead of giving you 12 waters, I'll pay you back many-fold its cost in silver. They decided on day X, you need to pay me back. That morning came and on that day, the rain hadn't come down yet, so he had no way to pay back the 12 containers of water. The Roman guy sent the Yid, he sent to Nakdimon, Shagar li o mayim omos sheyesh lo li biyadcha. You either owe me the 12 waters or you owe me the 12 bars of silver. So shalach lo, the day's not over yet. Adayin yesh leizman kol hayom kulo shaliu. We said it's going to be, let's say, the 10th of the month. It's only 9 a.m. I've got until 8 p.m. when the sun sets. Leave me be. But so Raim in the middle of the afternoon, shalach lo, the malva, the lender, wanted to get back his goods. So he said, Shagar li, send me o mayim omos sheyesh li biyadcha. You have to give back to me either the water that you borrowed in kind, 12 for 12, the 12 silver bars. Shalach lo, so the Yid Nakdimon sent back to this person, Adayin yesh li shahos bayom, I have time. The mincha, later in the day, Shalach lo, he sends to him again a third messenger. Shagar li o mayim omos yesh li biyadcha. Give me either the water you owe me or the 12 silver bars. Shalach lo, Adayin yesh li shahos bayom. So lig leg alav osan adon. The guy made fun of him. Lig leg alav. It means he kind of mocked him. Amar, he says, Kol hashana kula lo yardu geshamim. It hasn't rained all year. Top of Chaf Aleph. Ve'achshav yardu geshamim. In the very, very last day, literally the 11th hour of the day, all of a sudden you're expecting it to rain. The sun's going to be setting soon. This guy was thrilled. He knew he was going to get his 12 silver bars, and he came out the victor in this little deal. Nichnas lebeis hamerchatz besimcha. This guy was thrilled. He goes into the bathhouse. He's going to go sit in the sauna. Going to be in the steam room for a little bit. All is well. Nakdim besimcha. Ad she'ha'adon nichnas besimcha so lebeis hamerchatz. While this guy was going into the beis hamerchatz, nakdimo nichnas lebeis hamikdash kshehu atzev. Nakdimon went into the Beis HaMikdash to have a conversation with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Nis Atef, he wrapped himself up, seemingly with a talis. What does Nis Atef mean? So he wrapped himself up, and what did he do? The Amad b'tefillah, he stood and he davened. Amar, he said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Amar lefanav Ribono shel olam, galui v'yadua lefanecha, shelo l'chvodi asisi, v'lo l'chvod beis abba asisi. I didn't do this for my own kavod. I didn't borrow this water for my father's kavod, for the name of my family. Ella l'chvodcha asisi, sheyumay mitzuyin la'olei regalim. Come on, I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for your children. Make it work. Miyad, instantly, niskashu shamayim be'avim v'yardu geshamim. All of a sudden, it got cloudy. The rain clouds collected, and all of them got filled up. All of the collection containers got filled up. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave him a little bit of extra rain. And then when the guy came out of the Beis HaMercha, it's this Roman guy, all of a sudden Nakdimon is chipper. Nakdimon ben Gurion Yatzami Beis HaMikdash. They crossed paths. When they bumped into one another, Amar lo, the Yid, Nakdimon says to the Roman guy, Tainli demei mayim. All right, give me the water that you owe me, the money that you owe me for the water. Yoser sheyesh libyadcha. I borrowed 12 containers, 1,000 gallons each, and now they all have 1,100 gallons. So you owe me some money. So Amar lo Yodea ani shelohiri shakadosh baruch hu esalam ela b'shvilcha. What a kiddush Hashem. He says, the Roman guy says, I know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu stared the whole world just for you. Ella, he says, but I have a taina. Adayin yeshli pischon pe'alecha she'otzi mimcha es ma'osai shekvar shakachama ugeshamim birshusi yardu. We made a deal that you pay me back on the 10th of the month. The sun just set and it's the 11th. So much as you're giving me back my containers full, that water was really mine because it was your obligation to pay me back on the 10th and not on the 11th. So you're asking me for the extra proceeds of the extra money that I gave you. It's a pashkia. It's not the 10th anymore. It's the 11th. So Nakdimon knows he has an ace up his sleeve, and that's Hashem. So he goes back into the Beis HaMikdash. Chazav v'nichnas to Beis HaMikdash. Nisatef amad v'tefila. V'amar lefanav Ribono shel olam. Hoda sheyesh lecha ahuvim be'olamecha. You know that people love you. Miyad nispazra avim v'zarcha achama. Instantly, the sun came out again. Unbelievable. He totally changed the solar system. So the sun came out again. But osasha amar lo ha'adon. Then the Roman guy said, wow, you are just next level. Ilu lo nikdara achama. Had the sun not shined just now, haya li pischon pe'alecha shotzi mimcha ma'osai. It really should have been the case that you were not the one to get this money. And that last line that we're going to learn for today, Tana, really, his name was not Nakdimon. Lo Nakdimon Shemo, la Buni Shemo. His name was Buni. V'lama nikra Shemo Nakdimon sheniktira chama ba'avuro. That the sun shined because of him, because of his tefillah. It's a very powerful story of tefillah. We'll stop right here, halfway down, 2 lines into the middle width lines on Chafam and Aleph, wishing you all a beautiful night.